Hello, everyone. It's Laurie and Jennie of AstroPath. Now, Jennie is of hiddenpathastrology.com, and I am here from astrolore.org. Together, we are AstroPath. So today we're doing an astrobiography about Barbara Walters, fascinating woman who just recently passed, and we're doing this video about her in honor of her life. Before we dive into that chart, I want you to really take a moment and subscribe to our channel. You can follow Jennie and I on different social media platforms. And you can find Astrolore on Patreon. That Patreon page, by the way, you want to join that as soon as you can. It is about to come under a lot of changes. I'm changing it from an Astrolore to AstroPath, where Jennie and I are going to be sharing that platform. And it's going to get a lot more interesting and exciting with both of us there. So yeah, please go there. You can find the link in the notes here below the video. So I hope you join us there. Now, is there anything else I need to say before we jump into Barbara Walters?
No, I think you've covered a lot. Thank you for covering all that.
All right. Okay. So let's, first of all, who's Barbara Walters?
Right? Who is Barbara Walters? She was an amazing interviewer. I will say that. She had a 65-year career in television. And she started out actually writing stories and then very quickly became the first woman news anchor on ABC and also the highest paid news anchor, period, at the time. I think it was in 1974. She is known for her interview style. She is a powerful, powerful interviewer, and it really shows in her chart. So I'm excited to do this astrobiography with you all.
Yeah, she's really interesting. She just died this past week, and she was 93 years old, I believe.
I think, yep.
Yeah, so she
Right.
lived a very, very long, fruitful life with a lot of career success and a lot of difficulties in personal relationships. She had a very complex life, as we all kind of do. Hers was more public than most of ours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, she's notable for a bunch of reasons. It seems like, again, her interviewing skills and her career was amazing. Her struggles definitely seem to show up in her marriages. She was married 4 times, twice to one man at the end there. And she also had she kind of had to grow up quick, but we'll get more into that when we start talking about the chart. But a lot of interesting little pieces here. So,
okay.
what do you think? Should we show the chart here?
Yeah, let's pull the chart up and take a look at what we see. And, just for your information, if you're watching this, we do use the whole sign house system. So you'll see that each house holds one full sign. And that may be different than the way you're used to looking at charts or not. Yeah, this is what works best in our opinion.
Yeah, and so the only thing you might notice is just that the ascendant and the midheaven, which we're going to talk about right out of the gate here, are separate floating points in this chart. So, but you'll see that, and you've probably noticed that in all the charts that we do.
Yeah.
Should we start with the midheaven, Laurie?
Yeah, the midheaven, the midheaven represents the person's career or reputation. So whenever we look at these astrobiographies that we do, we always choose people that, are famous on one level or another. So how we are going to know them as the public is going to be related to the midheaven. And for Barbara Walters, her midheaven is in the 10th house and in Cancer. So what does that tell us right out of the gate? What does that tell us about her career, about her reputation, and how she lives in the public eye?
Well, Cancer's a cardinal sign, so right away, that's what it makes me think of. This is somebody who's going to be able to initiate new things in our society. And I guess it brings in other Cancer characteristics, but that's the main one I think about is that ability there's a fierceness to Cancer that kind of gets underestimated. And it also means that her moon is going to be very, very important to her career. And in this case, her moon is in Gemini, and it's not too far from Jupiter. And it's that Gemini is the ability to talk and communicate. So right off the bat, you have somebody who's got the gift of the gab.
Right. Right. And I see that Cancer midheaven, and if you watch her, and speaking of watching her, the biography, the movie, the documentary that we watched is called Barbara Walters, Her Story. It was done in 2014. You can watch it on YouTube. It's really fascinating because it goes through and shows interviews that, parts of interviews with dozens of people. This woman interviewed everyone. It's really wild, the vast array of people that she interviewed. And one of the things I think of with that Cancer moon, the Cancer midheaven, is that she approached each person in a very personal, emotional style. She was, this woman has like no water in her chart at all. She's all air, she's all intellect, and yet her heart is right on her sleeve when she's interviewing those people. And she makes each one feel emotionally respected, I think, even when she's asking these insanely direct, powerful questions. She does it in a way that people feel emotionally safe to give her the answers. And that comes out in other things in the chart. But that Cancer right there, she's asking these hard questions, but she's also emotionally connecting and being a little protective in a funny kind of way. And the gift of the gab, the expansive ability to really, her emotions are in the conversation.
Yeah, she really brings that right into it. And she has the ability to draw out the most incredible stories.
Oof.
I mean, this is a woman who talked to presidents, to murderers, to dictators, to heartbreaking stories about children with various struggles, to Christopher Reeve, to Robin Williams. I mean, there's all kinds of. She interviewed Putin before he was the head of Russia. I'll say that. She also covered really intense subjects, like 9/11. And just all kinds of different things that she did.
Right.
She also interviewed like Monica Lewinsky, just to show you the breadth of the people and I was shocked at how she's always kind of the same in every interview, no matter what level. She's unflappable, and she kind of sits down and brings people into that. I mean, she's like the calmest kind of mother archetype you could ever possibly imagine. Where like, okay, we're just going to talk about how you murdered your parents,
Right.
It's insane. So I hope you do watch the documentary.
It really is wild to see, and that documentary is really excellent at showing that breadth of people and her ability. The other thing about that moon ruling the midheaven and the moon and Jupiter being in the 9th house is it's not like she sat in a studio and interviewed all these people. Many of them she did, but she traveled all over the world. She interviewed people in rainforests and on camels. I don't know if that's actually true, but she did a lot of her interviews out in the field, which is interesting in that 9th house.
Yeah, the other thing that you can't help but notice is that she's got Pluto in the 10th house in Cancer. Right. This is an outer planet in a water sign, so I know Laurie and I don't really think of that as because you mentioned that there's no water in this chart. There is water through Pluto, but we don't really. That's a generational sign,
right?
But the thing to take away from that is Pluto is such a powerful planet, and there it is in the 10th house, really bringing her into the public eye. I think it's Pluto's empowerment, and when you see Pluto like that, it's a suggestion of being able to take one's power in a very public place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I count the elemental balance, I don't include the outer planets. So that's why, yes. Okay. So that kind of covers the midheaven, I think, right?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay. All right. So let's talk next about, I'll make those lines go away. And let's talk about the ascendant. You can't talk about the ascendant without talking about the sun, because the sun is right there on the ascendant in Libra. Now, the sun at 1 degree of Libra, that's the Aries point or the cardinal point, right, Jenny?
Yep, which is a
And
place of prominence, right? Yeah.
right. It's like the sun is right there. It's not only on the ascendant, but it's at that cardinal point where it's a public statement. Here I am, and I'm going to be in the public. Yeah, she definitely had an incredible amount of strength. And we talked about or you mentioned, I think, the fact that Cancer is a cardinal sign. Libra is a cardinal sign. These are signs that are very strong and really make things happen.
Yeah, and I think Barbara Walters is a great showcase for the potency of Libra, because I think Laurie and I always talk about how Libra kind of gets dismissed a little bit, but Libra is powerful. It is
Yeah.
not an easy sign to deal with because it kind of walks that balance point. And I think Barbara Walters,
Right.
I think of her as being like the fulcrum of that balance point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you also had said something about it being like the velvet glove of her interview skills, because it
Yeah.
came across in this very Libra balanced diplomatic way, yet she asked such pointed questions,
Yeah.
which, I mean, really her first house here, which according to whole sign houses, she's got the sun, Mars, and Mercury all in the first house. I mean, that is a very powerful statement.
Yes.
The first house is probably the strongest house in the whole chart. It refers to the self and just her self development, her self actualization, and so having that much power in this one house really shows up. It comes across every time she sits down with someone in that interview.
Yeah. 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 I was thinking about the diplomacy skills of Libra, the the ability to sit there and look at a murderer and say, so how are you feeling about the fact that you just killed your parents? She would just ask these questions, and she could ask them in a way that they would be answered. And it's just so tied in with this chart, that unusual ability.
Mhm. Yeah, and just other things that kind of popped in my mind as we were talking about this is because the sun's right there. She was born just after sunrise, so you can
Right.
see the sun has already risen past the horizon. That makes this a day chart,
Yeah.
which really imbues that sun with ever more power.
Yeah.
It really makes it into it's just such a strong statement.
Yeah, I think of that, you think about just as she was born, just before she was born, the sun comes up. It's like you walk into a room, someone with a sun there, they walk into the room and they're seen.
Mhm.
It is such an incredible public idea of the sun coming over the horizon. There it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other part about the ascendant is it's with all that Libra, it's ruled by Venus. So you got to go look at Venus and see what's happening with Venus. And Venus is in Leo, which is the sun's sign. So we talk about that as the sun and Venus being in mutual reception, meaning they're in
Yes.
each other's signs, which also means that they rule each other's houses.
Right.
So that puts this Venus, the planet of beauty and this of pleasure and aesthetics, in a very prominent place in this chart. It makes it, that's how she kind of drew people in. I know we talked about Cancer on the midheaven and some of those archetypes, but here with Venus, it's, hey, sit down with me and let me shine my light right on you.
Right.
And let me ask you these questions,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people just let her because it's
Yeah.
such a magnanimous combination.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact with the sun ruling that 11th house where Venus is, it really, the community, the people watching her were mesmerized by this. They're
Yeah.
absolutely mesmerized. She really had a hell of a community that supported her and that she worked within. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. Fascinating.
Yeah. I see you circled too the Mars and Mercury together, and I think that really kind of sums up. If you just, I think that's the first thing I saw when I opened this chart. And for those of you who are learning how to do astrology, pay attention to that like first instinct,
Yeah.
because that's the first thing I saw, and that is a very clear statement about her ability to kind of penetrate in, ask the
Right.
question. And just
Right.
draw it out and be very kind of cutting and incisive in how she was doing it. And Mars next to Mercury is she's doing it through her communication,
Right.
but because it's in
Yeah.
Libra, people allowed her in. They let her in to do that, to kind of make those very clear, pointed statements.
Yeah.
So,
There's an interesting thing about Mars being in Libra itself is just, yeah, there's a charisma to it.
mm,
It's like this energy to take action in a way that looks very gentle and soft. And with Mercury there, yeah, her thinking and her taking action are so present. Oh my gosh, what a chart.
yeah, and it's yeah, and you can really start stitching those things together when you look at some of the rulerships, as in, that the moon is in Gemini, so that's looking to Mercury to, like, hey, how do I communicate? And then Mercury's right next to Mars. It's like, okay, you're going to do it in this very pointed way. Yet both of those planets, Mars and Mercury, are looking to Venus. So what shows up is this more Venus person that's, as you said, absolutely mesmerizing,
Right,
and not off-putting or aggressive feeling.
right,
Even though she just asked questions like nobody else.
right,
Um,
right. And look at that Mars and Mercury trine the moon and sextile the Venus. These things just work so beautifully together in her teaching, her expression, herself, her community. There's such what a powerful statement all of that is. Okay.
yeah. And just the way that you just drew that out, Laurie, too, it really shows everybody like how much, like, this part of her chart, that very kind of public, above the horizon, and bringing her personal self into it, that's such a central thrust of her
Yeah.
chart, like that
Yeah.
theme. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
nice.
fascinating. Okay. Now I
Yeah.
think we've done a good job of that. So the next thing we want to look at is just the sun and moon. I mean, we've talked about them quite a bit because they're tied into the ascendant and midheaven, but there's a few other things that we want to bring into this conversation. What's the next one? What do you want to talk about next?
Well, as you're saying, that just maybe one thing I just want to mention that might be helpful here is thinking about the moon phase. She's
Oh,
got
yeah.
a disseminating moon. Disseminating moon is the one that's distributing information,
Right.
distributing wisdom, to others. So by doing the job that she did, she revealed, gosh, just so many things about our culture through
Yeah.
these individual stories. And Gemini is the storyteller.
Yeah.
So that's really, when you look at her life as a whole and her impact as a whole, that's what she's doing, bringing all of these different people's stories to the forefront, which, quite honestly, is one of the most powerful things you can do in terms of fulfilling that Cancer potential for empathy. So
That's
that's kind
beautiful.
of,
Yeah,
yeah.
the disseminating moon, I think of it as the teacher moon. And then with the storyteller in the ninth house of teaching and expansion, she, yeah, she taught a lot through stories of individuals of all types.
Mhm.
Pretty amazing. Okay, what else?
Well, what else? The one thing I think that is important is the moon is opposed Saturn.
Yep.
In simple terms, that gives you some information about her childhood. She did describe it as lonely. She did have to take care of an older sister who was mentally disabled.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of this whole theme about having to grow up too quickly. And some of that ties into her drive to make money, because she saw how this disruptive things can be, and I think you said she has some fear around having to support
Yeah.
her family. Well, but she did it.
She did. She did. Yeah, I think that's really interesting that Saturn being in the third house of, among other things, siblings. And there was that heaviness in that area, and that Saturn ruling the fourth house. You know, she did talk in that documentary about being concerned that she was going to ultimately have to support her family, and she did. Well, a cute thing in that video was she talked about her father owned nightclubs, like big nightclubs in all kinds of different cities. So he was gone a lot and traveled a lot. And she said she really wished he was a dentist. I don't know why, but I thought that was really funny. I wish my dad was a dentist. Um, but yeah, so she really had to take on that responsibility for her older sibling.
Mhm.
That had to be hard. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about that?
Nope. I think that's
Okay.
nope.
The next one I want to talk about then is the sun's opposition, Uranus's opposition to the sun. And there is a lot about relationships personal, intimate relationships were clearly very difficult for her. As beautifully as her outward career went, her relationships were really challenging. She was married 4 times to 3 different men.
Mhm.
And they were hard relationships, but you look at this and her focus is on herself and what she is doing in the world. This first house is a very personal focus, and then with the opposition Uranus in the 7th house, that would suggest a lot of disruption. And she was born in what, 1929. You think about someone born in 1929, and it's unlikely. I mean, she was very heterosexual. She was involved with men. And how could you expect someone in 1929 to find a partner that would be interested in being married to such a strong, powerful, self-determined woman? So there's a lot of disruption from the area of relationship. There's a lot of
Yeah.
pull and stress in that for
Yeah.
her.
Yeah, and I just think that this is somebody who cannot tolerate being capped off and being
Right.
contained. And her
Right.
need for freedom with Uranus and
Right.
in Aries, ruled by Mars in the first house, like her need
Yes.
for freedom is very, very powerful.
Very
And so
powerful.
I imagine she's like, this isn't working for me. Like you're trying to cap me off. And this also
Right.
happened with her work partners, didn't it? Like some of the other news anchors. You can
Yes.
imagine how threatened some of these
Yes.
men must have felt by someone with the power at her disposal. So
Yeah.
she has a very, young chart. This is a very
Very.
masculine energy chart with
Yeah.
lots of air and fire, and it's
Yeah.
very outward.
Yeah.
And I like men of her era, not going to handle that
Didn't
very
take well to that.
well.
And yeah, the documentary talks a lot about her relationship with Harry Reasoner. Harry Reasoner couldn't stand being in the room with her, and they were co-anchors for, I don't remember how long that lasted, but it was not a pretty scene. And whoever, I don't know if I can't remember, I'm terrible at this, but whether she was working for ABC or CBS, but what they chose to do about the problem between her and Harry Reasoner was they got rid of him,
Yeah.
which had to be, a shock to him. But yeah, what a gift. They knew what they had in her, apparently.
Yeah. No, I read something about how for a while she couldn't ask the first 3 questions. She had to only ask the 4th question, not
Yeah,
with him, but it was a different co-anchor, who
yeah,
was trying to
yeah,
contain her or control the situation.
yeah.
And essentially every time it got to that 4th question, her question, she just blew
Well,
his doors off.
television was a male dominated, like, major, and especially the news.
Yeah.
It was only men.
Hmm.
It was only men in that world, and she really, yeah, broke some glass ceilings, as they say. So I think that opposition is really important, and the fact that you pointed out that Mars rules that 7th house of intimate partnership, and then you look at Mars, and Mars is closest, I believe. Well, there's a very powerful square to Pluto.
Yeah. That really heats things up. I was like, wonder how sex part of all these things was for her.
Right, right. I would expect
Lot of
that,
heat.
and that's probably why she continued, she didn't just say, I'm single, leave it alone. She kept getting married. And I think she did. I think she probably had a very passionate part of her that really needed that engagement of a partner. And she dated a lot of really interesting, not necessarily to my mind appealing men, but a lot of interesting men. Who was it? Greenspan she dated for a long time. And
Yeah, there's a couple different politicians, Senator Warner in California, I think, a couple others.
yeah,
Was one she had an affair with too, and Massachusetts. So very, very interesting and, spicy
Yeah.
storyline about her partnerships and just, like you said, being a woman, being born in 1929, it's really tough to tolerate the boxes that she
Yeah.
constantly was put into. So,
And it's just, it's just interesting to think about the passionate discord going on in her personal life at the same time as she's showing up in these interviews with that velvet glove way of dealing with the public and with her interviewees. But then she's got that other side. It's fascinating. What a great chart.
Yeah, it is a really cool chart. It's
I
a
like
really
it.
cool study in air as well. Just to understand what air is. Air is, unifying people through ideas. And air is very much the intellect, the mental space. This very heady area. It is steering you away from emotions and things like that. In terms of how she conducted herself, I mean, not she certainly elicited emotions from other people, but the way she conducted herself in her career is very air. Like if you want to understand air, she's a great study in it. In that way, her even keeled, balanced way. The diplomat. The diplomat and the storyteller are the two archetypes that come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, those are the two archetypes that she lives in. The storyteller with that moon in Gemini, and the diplomat. The something else I was thinking about Libra. Well, it seems to have escaped me, but it's fascinating. Just, I guess Libra, here's what I was thinking, is Libra, the thing that people think of with Libra a lot is the indecisiveness. People talk a lot about indecisiveness and the ability to see both sides. Well, that ability to see both sides is what really enabled her to sit and talk to murderers. And the air, the almost, the objectivity. I mean, she could just step into that role of being the interviewer without being all emotional and cringy, or I mean, I'm sure she had her ideas, but Libra's able to hold both sides and see both sides. It doesn't mean that they don't have opinions, but they can hold that space to understand both sides.
Yeah, they can mediate. Yeah. And it's funny as you're talking about this, sort of like this both sides, almost like it's a scale. I keep just thinking about Venus itself, and Leo is kind of being the center point of that kind of, balanced seesaw of Libra, and not only that, but Venus is conjunct Neptune, which kind of brings it into this transcendent place where it can rise above the mundane. And that's what rules the whole chart because it rules her ascendant. So that's kind of it just made this little image in my mind of that, and that, that Leo Venus, it's so magnanimous and it just draws people in. And so it just kind of paints this little picture of her personality.
Yeah, I love that you said that Venus in Leo is the center point, because there it is. It's the center point.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. All right. Is there anything else we want to say?
I done a good treatment.
Can we touch on one other tiny piece?
Of course.
What I would like to do is, just for one moment, I'd like to share a different chart.
Oh, let me stop sharing.
Yeah. Okay, just for a moment. This is her chart on the inside, and this is the time of her death. And I just wanted, for those of you who know something about transits, I just wanted to point out a few things. I don't want to have a big conversation about it, but I want to point out that there were a few really important things going on when Barbara Walters decided to leave this planet. One is she was having her nodal return, which is you know, a completion process. She also had Uranus conjuncting her node, waking up to the direction. I don't know. There's different ways you could think about this. Mars doing its retrograde in her 9th house over her Jupiter and the moon, and Jupiter opposing her sun. I think those are all really interesting things to think about.
Mhm.
Is there anything you want to say about any of those, Jenny?
Well, yeah, a couple things. First of all, Uranus and the North Node are in her 8th house. So the 8th house does imply death, among other things, some sort of ending. Jupiter in her 7th house means getting a lot of public attention.
Right.
And of course, when she died, everybody,
Right.
realized that she had died, and it was a big moment.
Yeah.
And it's kind of rocked the news world for a little bit. So I think that that kind of brings that up. The Mars retrograde is just interesting because Mars retrograded pretty close to her moon, and then it went all the way back, and then it started making its well, actually it hasn't turned direct yet in this chart, but I just wonder about that. Like,
Yeah.
was there any kind of a additional health issue? I don't know. She was 93 years old, so she lived a good life. I don't know, but just curious to see what was going on in her life those last few weeks.
I just think that that's really interesting, to just look at that and think about it. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is Jupiter is often involved in a direct major transit when people pass. And I think, like you said, yeah, I think part of that Jupiter piece is all of a sudden everyone's thinking of all the wonderful things about her. And her sun ruling the 11th house. Yeah, her community is talking about her.
Mm-hmm.
The community out there is talking about her. So I think that I just wanted to open that up very briefly, just to think about it, because I thought it was quite interesting.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. It's great.
Yeah. All right. I think we're ready to wrap up. Thank you, everyone. And if you're still watching, please go check the link for Patreon. Join us there.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you, Jenny. Bye-bye.